What do you think this means in terms of the processing capacity of young brains?
They're excited the first time, and then they quickly get used to it. And so they're always waiting for what the new thing is. On the flip side, this generation is great. They got a million things they know about because they were able to time travel and look at things in the distant past.
A picture's worth 1,000 words. A video is worth 1 billion pictures. If I scroll through an Instagram feed or a Twitter feed, X feed that is, I can see 50 videos, 100 videos inside of 10 minutes easily from disparate contexts. It can be sports, dogs, this, that. So, and the algorithm's obviously deciding what I see. But I don't think there's ever been an instance in human evolution where that was the case. I mean, even with television with 200 channels, you can flip between channels. Okay, I guess you could keep looping, but that doesn't tend to be the case. People eventually would settle on a show or navigate a menu to a show. What do you think this means in terms of the processing capacity of young brains in particular?
Well, let's talk about what the brain does. So we know these different areas, which you've talked about, locus coeruleus releasing norepinephrine in the brain. When something new and exciting happens, someone claps their hands or pokes your ear, a bug flies in your face, the neurons fire. They're surprised that happened. If it keeps happening, then the neurons stop firing. So one of the things that's most surprising to me and interesting to me is your experiments by Richardson, DeLong, and others, recording from these areas, nucleus basalis releasing acetylcholine, locus coeruleus, even dorsal raphe releasing serotonin, is that they're excited the first time, and then they quickly get used to it. And so they're always waiting for what the new thing is. What's the thing that's going to be informative? What's the thing that's going to have the most rewards? What's the thing that's going to have the most risk? And the problem is we don't know what the long-term consequences are of having over and over and over activation of that pathway. We know that if you take a child and just sit them in orphanages for years upon years, they don't come out well. That's pretty clear with animals or humans that deprivation is not good. But what happens on the flip side when you stimulate and then you overstimulate? We don't really know, at least I don't know of any clear-cut, well-designed experiments. The suggestion, as you know, is maybe it increases depression and anxiety among adolescents. That appears to be what's happening, but there's no causal link because everyone is doing this experiment together. My children watched lots of videos exposed to lots of things. It's very difficult to get rid of it. It's sort of in the water. It's in the culture, having a phone and having that restricted view. On the flip side, this generation is great. They got a million things they know about because they were able to time travel and look at things in the distant past, look at things in the future, look at things in other countries. Their awareness of people who are different from them is so exciting. So it's hard to balance those two. But in general, the concern for me would be if you max out that neuromodulator release, if you do things all the time, including illicit drugs, that push that up, it's intuitive to me that would then push down all your other experiences. Mm-hmm. So I've had the great pleasure of taking my face from the desert world of the Sinai Peninsula and putting it down into the water of the Red Sea. It's miraculous. I mean, the level of colors and movement and textures. And you pull your head back up and you recalibrate it like this is the moon. There's all this rock. You put your face back down. That contrast to me is real and very exciting. Others have told me that they've taken illicit drugs and had very similar experiences. And I'm not going to say that my experience of real colors and real life forms and real waves and patterns is superior. It's just my preference. And I think we know people for thousands of years have had these kinds of experiences, looking at mountains and streams and groups of people. What we don't know is what happens when you take a lot of fentanyl, a lot of methamphetamine, a lot of cocaine, or even nicotine at high levels. We don't know. But the worry is, Ben Franklin's, all things in moderation. Probably better to take it slow and make sure you didn't overdo this one.
You were snorkeling on a coral reef in the Dead Sea. Is that the experience you were describing?
Yeah.
I agree. When you see the richness of a coral reef and then you pop up, it's like the contrast is a big part of that experience.
Yeah.
But it stays with you, right? When you come back, those experiences stay with you as an enriching experience. Watching a video of a coral reef, well, that can be relaxing. It's a completely different experience, as you pointed out. I have to be careful because I'm almost 50 and I want to believe that real world experiences are better than virtual ones. And now with the huge arrival of AI, which is only going to expand, everyone's asking the same sorts of questions. At what point is it true sensory deprivation? I mean, on the one end of the continuum, as you pointed out, sensory deprivation is bad, especially for a developing brain. The other end of the continuum, sensory gluttony, is also bad. And we could be talking about food here, right? Starvation is bad and gluttony is bad. Both make you sick.
Yeah.
One kills you faster. Starvation kills you faster. But as we've now seen with the rates of obesity in this country, gluttony is, I'm not calling people gluttons to be disparaging of them, but let's face it, people are consuming more calories than they burn for whatever reason. So I think when it comes to sensory input, I have a feeling we're going to arrive at a similar place in a few years where we are going to realize that we need to set upper limits on how much sensory input and set quality standards for sensory input. Right now, we're just kind of drinking from the fire hose.
Well, and how you interact with it, and what the ways you interact with it are. If the only way to interact with it is flipping the screen, that's pretty limited. I mean, the human body does a lot of amazing things. The way we can navigate, whether it's skateboards or paragliding or whatever, people can do fantastic things with their bodies. But if you're not required to do it, we know this principle of use it or lose it. If you don't have that exposure to the sounds of Swedish vowels, when we were born, we could hear all the Swedish vowels, and then we weren't raised in a culture that used them, and they just disappeared. And the worry is that ability, the natural predisposition of our brains to handle those kinds of inputs, that over time when we don't use it, we'll say, I guess you don't need this. I guess swimming is not something that you're going to need to do. I guess, and a lot of people don't swim, which is fine, but how many of those experiences get turned off, especially at a young age where they're easier to pick up? That's one of the big questions. I don't know. But it makes sense that the kinds of training, the inputs in, junk in, junk out, we used to think, again, that bodies just grew, babies just got bigger. That's all that happened. And then we started realizing the things that they saw mattered. At first we thought, well, let's find what they like. What do they like the most? You may remember these old experiments where they found that if you give a baby a face and then you give it a cartoon face, it'll look more strongly at the cartoon face, the exaggerated black and white face. And some babies had trouble disengaging from it. The attention mechanisms were so cued to two black circles and a mouth. And people sold baby mobiles that were these very engaging things that the babies couldn't get their eyes off of. Now, when you go to the Babies R Us or whatever store, you don't see those anymore. You see much more naturalistic kinds of things. But there was a moment when we thought, well, if the babies like it, give it to them. And then we sort of thought, maybe just because they like it is not sufficient. Maybe we should try to do a longer term read, not that short term immediate gratification, but the longer term. What does it do that the face I've seen is an extreme face, an exaggerated face? And again, we think back to individual neurons, whether retinal ganglion cells or cells in fusiform face area. These are parts of the brain that are involved in visual processing. If those areas are wired normally, appropriately, then we pay attention to the right cues. It's typical when I'm looking at you, when you're talking, to look at your eyes, not look at your mouth. But there are a number of people who will be more interested in the movement of the mouth because it's larger than the eye movements. And that's a less effective way to look, is to look at the mouth instead of looking at the eyes. These are very subtle things, but some of the microaggressions, micro gestures that are critical, not just in our culture, but in monkeys, where gritting your teeth might mean one thing and winking or looking away might mean another thing. We want our children to pick those things up and know about how to interact with humans. On the flip side, social media and online culture is part of our culture now too. And so depriving them of that and having them be deprived of what their culture now is also seemed harmful. So for me and my wife, thinking about, I don't want them to know nothing about the internet, but I don't want them to jump in with both feet and have all of their experiences. So what proportion is that? 20% of your day on the internet? That seems reasonable, maybe. Many people are at 80, 90% sometimes. I think it might be better to be at 5%, only when you're needing it to reach out or do things. But I don't know the answer to that. We're doing this big experiment. But we've done these experiments before. We did this experiment, like you said, with television, 200 channels. We did this experiment with the radio. We did this experiment with the printing press, when suddenly you could go into a library and there were books everywhere. What would that do to people? And I'm generally an optimist, you can probably already tell. Humanity's done pretty good so far. The last 100 technologies didn't end things, whether it was machine guns or nuclear war or weapons. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I think we will rebalance, and it won't necessarily be someone telling us. It'll be people figuring out, I don't feel good when I use this. So both my son and daughter will routinely mention to me when they turn off apps, pick your social media, they just need a break. And I think that's, again, a sign that people individually have enough autonomy to figure out for themselves what's working and what's not. But it would be good to have a body of knowledge to reinforce that and make it feel okay. You're not missing out. You're not punished because you turn this off for a few days or weeks.
I'm very surprised that somebody had the good sense to steer parents away from buying mobiles. We should probably explain, these are like things that you hang above the baby's crib, of course, and they spin around. They have kind of like branches on a tree. They're colorful, they have motion, babies can interact with them safely, this kind of thing. I'm quite surprised, pleased but surprised to hear that when the ideal mobile for getting babies to attend with just the simple faces was discovered, that somebody intervened and said, hey, just because they like it doesn't mean it's good for them. I mean, everything else in sort of a commercial industry runs exactly the opposite way until we discover it's actually harming us. So I'm positively surprised. I don't know who made that decision, but I'm relieved to hear that if you go buy a mobile now, it's not the one that would maximally cause the baby to attend. It's the one that's best for their development of the visual system. And I immediately think of iPads. Mm-hmm. I mean, you give a baby an iPad, they'll just be there all day. And we think, oh, well, they like it. We sort of know it's not good for them. And yet it's become the digital babysitter that the television used to be. Now, I'm not anti-technology. I mean, I grew up in Silicon Valley after all, and I use technology, including social media. But I guess I'm concerned and struck by, this question of where to draw the line. So in this instance, somebody had the good sense. But this is like the different, I mean, the food equivalent would be, I'm sure kids would prefer ice cream. They'd eat it all day long as opposed to things that are more nutritious for them. But someone had to intervene.